Welcome to another episode of the PhysioSchool Podcast. My name is Kash Madi, and I'll be your host for this episode. Now, one of the reasons why we started this podcast was to interview physio students and physiotherapists to highlight the different paths people have taken to get into physio school. One thing you're going to learn from listening to our podcast is that everyone's journey is different. And that's what's so great about this profession, because we have people from all different walks of life, different backgrounds, different experiences that can then contribute to the betterment of physiotherapy. So on this episode, I'll be interviewing a new graduate from McMaster University who is now a resident physiotherapist working out of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, with a bit of a non-traditional path to PT school. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Nicole Smith. How's it going, Nicole?
Hey, Kash, it's going well. How are you?
Good. First off, congratulations and welcome to the profession.
Thank you. It feels really good.
So what's life like now as a working physiotherapist as opposed to a student?
Well, it took a couple weeks or maybe even a month for my nervous system to accept the fact that I'm no longer a student. And it's just incredible. I love working. I wake up every morning. It doesn't feel like I'm going to a job. It feels like I'm going to something that I'm passionate and interested in, and that I just get to get paid for, which is awesome because it doesn't feel like work. And yeah, it's just incredible to have that academic portion behind and be able to have my own practice now.
Awesome. And where do you work right now?
So I'm mainly at iMove Clinic in Hamilton. So it's on the West Mountain, and I'm there 4 days a week. And then I spend one full day a week at Blueberry Therapy in Dundas, and I'm doing pelvic health there. So that's a pelvic health clinic.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
why don't we start off with first asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself. So why don't you tell us where you're from, where you did your undergrad, mother's maiden name, social security number, whatever else you want to say.
Well, Rubelman, very Jewish. No, so I am. I'm originally from Florida. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I went to high school there. I did my undergrad at the University of Florida in Gainesville. I
Go
did.
Gators.
Yeah, exactly. I did my undergrad in a Bachelor's of Science in psychology. There's a lot there to unpack with how that transformed and how that got into physio, but we'll save that for a little bit. I'm a resident physiotherapist. Yeah.
Awesome. So why don't we unpack that right now? Why don't you
Yeah.
tell us your journey to becoming a physiotherapist and getting into physio school? Because coming from the States, that's a little bit different than what most people have to go through applying from a Canadian university.
Yeah. So I'm not going to lie, even going into physio school, I didn't know too much about the physiotherapy profession. I don't know if it's like that in the States, at least in Florida or my world back then. I didn't really know anything about physical therapy. It never crossed my radar, and I'm quite surprised because I feel like I'm such a perfect fit for it. I'm surprised it never came up in undergrad. But taking a couple steps back, I grew up in a very kind of health conscious household. I was always very interested in nutrition and just a healthy lifestyle. Physical and mental health was a big part of my life, even as a child. So I, when I was in high school, I was in a program called the Academy of Finance, and we had to do this project of making our 30-year or 15-year plan. And I did a Google search of, what healthcare profession makes the most money. That's not a doctor or something like that. And I saw something along the lines of nurse anesthetist. So I kind of made this 15-year plan at 16 years old. I'm going to go and be a nurse anesthetist based on that number figure. So I applied to the University of Florida for my, I guess it was pre-nursing, would have been the major I would have applied as, and did 2 years of that pre-nursing major. I worked a little bit in the hospital, really didn't like it all that much. Didn't love my classes, partially because you're this, now this little fish in a big pond, and you're in these lecture halls of, 1,000 students kind of thing. And then it was my second year, I was in physiology, and I got a C+ in it. And it was kind of like my whole world and identity just crashed down. We'll discuss too a little bit about how the grading is different in the States, but a C plus, it would have been like a 78, 79%. So really not a whole thing to get all dramatic about, but I went to my nursing advisor and she was basically like, good luck getting into nursing school now. So I really was kind of, who am I? What am I doing? I don't even like being in a hospital. I don't know what I want or who I am. It was around that time that a lot of my peers were studying abroad, and I didn't do that for financial reasons. So it was this, ending the second year of undergrad, and I was looking online I was really into yoga around that time. Around 18, I started getting pretty into just doing kind of casual yoga. So I wanted to learn more about that, and I wanted to travel, and I was also into nutrition. So through a Google search, I found this place called the Mystical Yoga Farm in Guatemala. So I went there for 2 months, and it was this like kind of hippie resort, but it was super cool because it's permaculture. So it's a lot of learning how to live off the land and design the land in order to be able to be self-sustaining. There's no electricity, all solar power, compost toilets. Learned a lot. But the main thing there was that you have to do yoga every morning. So it's a 90-minute practice. And a lot of things transformed there for me, where I kind of went from being, casual into yoga to kind of dedicating my whole life now to yoga, because I just saw such huge transformations. When you do something every day for 30 or 60 days, it really changes you. It changes that, neural hardwiring into what your expectations are when you wake up in the morning. Okay, I'm going to stretch. I'm going to do yoga in the morning. It also allowed me to really get to know my body and see the drastic transformations from day to day of doing something consistently in terms of physical activity. So that was really the first bit of getting into my body and getting into feeling passionate about movement. So I went back to Florida after that summer, and I switched my major to psychology because I was also into kind of that mental, emotional health. I was also doing a certificate in spirituality and healthcare through the nursing program at the University of Florida. So it was a lot about how to incorporate mindfulness and meditation and certain self-development strategies into healthcare. So that's where the psychology part attraction kind of came from. So I switched my major to psychology, knowing that I could still take all of the science and nursing prerequisites. So switched to psychology, finished the 2 years, 2 years later. So the whole bachelor's in psychology. And coming towards the end, I was still like, I don't know what I want to do. I like psychology a lot, but I'm not ready to do a master's. I know I eventually want to do a master's, but I'm not sure. So I'm still really, really into yoga. So I'd like to get my yoga teacher training. So I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to go to India, get my yoga teacher training, and then go back to school. So that's what I did. I went to India. A couple of things happened along the way. So just with that India piece, I did my yoga teacher training, and my teacher was actually a chiropractor by trade. So it was very much through the lens of anatomy and physiology and functional anatomy. So that kind of painted a picture of, wow, I really love this alignment aspect and how to adjust little fine-tuned things that can completely transform a yoga pose. So in that window before India, I met my now husband, and he is a big-time meditator and meditation teacher. He's also a researcher and professor in cognitive science, and he really merges that yogic Eastern Buddhist philosophies with Western science. So what is meditation actually happening in the brain, and how can we talk about these Eastern philosophies in our Western scientific language? So I had a really heavy influence in that. And then now I can teach yoga. We were living in the UK for that time. So anyways, this one gap year turned into 5. I was teaching yoga mainly in the UK. I was doing meditation a lot. Those whole 5 years, it was pretty much an hour of yoga and an hour of following my breath and meditation every day. So it was a very transformative 5 years. And I think we'll touch on it later, but it really prepared me for the practitioner that I am now and kind of my experience in school as a returning student. So I was teaching yoga, and I was just really, really into that alignment and anatomy part of it. But still, I don't know, I think it was a couple years in, and I just felt like something was missing, some type of structure or meaning. I knew that there was more that I wanted to do, and I was kind of hitting a wall with what I was feeling like I was doing. So I started thinking about going back to school. So I had graduated from the University of Florida in 2014. So in 2017, Mark, who's my husband, and I got married, and we were still living in the UK, but decided to come back to Canada, and I was going to apply for Canadian permanent residency. So
And your husband is Canadian then?
Yeah, Mark is
Okay.
Canadian. Yeah, and we've lived all over, so it's been very complicated and messy. But so I have to kind of think about all of these timelines. So we were living in Canada, we got married, decided to move back to Canada and apply for my permanent residency. And if you apply for your permanent residency from within Canada, it takes about 15 months and you cannot leave Canada. So we were living with his
We're
mom.
currently in that process right now. So my wife is American from Florida as well.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, from Florida. And we are currently applying for permanent residency, and she's staying here. So hopefully we can speed up that timeline. But same
Canadian permanent
situation,
residency.
very relatable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's funny. It's nice that she has the ability to come to wonderful Canada. I feel with everything that's gone on in the past 2 years, I feel very, very fortunate to be able to be here. And I'll actually be able to apply for my citizenship in a couple months, which is really exciting.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. So couldn't leave Canada. We were here for the 15 months. He actually ended up leaving because he got a job back in the UK again. But so I knew I wanted to go back to school. I didn't know what. I had somebody like a couple years prior say, like, what about physical therapy? Because I was talking about them, like, I don't know what I want to do. I feel like there's something missing. And I didn't really know too much about it. So I started doing more research. And just all I knew about physio was that, Google search description of like experts in movement. And I was like, that sounds awesome. That's exactly what I want to do. Never been to a physio in my life. I know this might sound very unconventional and like I don't know. Anyways, I don't want to digress there. But so I looked into the programs within Canada, and I was looking at the different schools and the requirements, and I was kind of like, nope, I can't apply to any. I don't qualify for any, and I can't do it. And Mark is, I know I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. I would have quit 100 times along the way, but he was very good about being able to see things as a whole and make lists and, the things that we have to do. So he said, okay, let's look a little bit deeper. All you need to do to apply for MAC, because MAC has barely any requirements compared to the other schools, is you need to just retake these 2 courses, because apparently education courses expire. So my anatomy and physiology from my undergrad were no longer eligible to count, because I think you need to take them within 8 years or something. And I would have taken them in my first year, something like that, first or second year. So I was like, no, I can't retake courses. How am I going to do that? And anyway, started looking into it. They needed to be university credits too. So that kind of adds in that difficulty of, okay, I'm not even a Canadian resident yet. I don't have my PR card, so I'm international. The only courses I'm really finding in Canada that I could take are non-university. So I still had my Florida license. So I was still, could come off as a Florida resident. So I started looking at the universities in Florida because it would have been more cost effective. I found University of West Florida, which I had never heard of prior. They had anatomy and physiology online because I can't leave Canada. And then they had, along with some other universities, it's always good to check this out, where if you can return as a returning student. So you don't have to necessarily apply as like applying to a university, that typical application process. You can just say, I already have a bachelor's, I just want to take these 2 courses, and they let you take them. So put in the application, that like very informal application to the University of West Florida. They said I can sign up for classes at this time. So I signed up for the anatomy and physiology, but then that other roadblock of, the physiology class is full. So I was like, oh, can't do it, can't apply, it's full. Like this dream is done. And it was actually around Christmas time, I think. And my sister-in-law was like, why don't you just email the prof? I was like, oh, I can't just do that. And she's like, well, it's worth the try. So I emailed the professor. She let me in, no problem. So all of these, obstacles keep coming up. And the big theme in all of this that I want to get across is that like all of those obstacles you're able to overcome quite easily if you just, take time and patience and have that to-do list. But every time I thought like, okay, this is the end of the road. It can't happen because of this. So I signed up for those 2 courses, which allowed me to apply for MAC. So I was applying to MAC as an international student. Didn't have my permanent residency yet. And you can apply to their program even if you don't have all the prerequisites, as long as you're enrolled in those prerequisites. And if you get accepted, then you have to like, as long as you get above their passing mark. So I ended up taking those 2 courses, doing very well in them. Anatomy and physiology did not prepare me for PT school at all. I don't feel like anything I learned in those 2 courses helped. And did not get into MAC. So I later looked into, I don't know, I was pretty upset about it. And I looked into it, and MAC and all of their rehab sciences, so SLP, OT, and PT, they accept 6 international students a year. So if you want to split that up, that's 2 in each program. So the odds of getting in are, quite slim. It's very competitive to get into PT school. And then as an international student, it's all the more competitive. So I kind of just said, okay, I didn't get in, and that dream's done, and just keep moving on with life. So I eventually got my PR card, and the day after, my husband had gotten a job at the University of Edinburgh, so he was there a couple months prior. I was waiting for my PR card so I could leave Canada. I'm going through citizenship stuff right now, so I was actually looking at dates, and the day after I got my PR card is when I flew to Edinburgh, so I left the day after. And we lived for almost a year in Edinburgh, and it was, again, 4 days or a week before the application was due. And I was like, should I apply again? And I was like, no, I don't want to apply again. And then I looked a little bit more into it. And because I was a permanent resident now or something, I could also apply to Queen's, but I just needed, I need to do that. They have like a letter of intent or why you want to go, which I think is nice. Personal statement. Yeah, because MAC doesn't have any of that. You just talk to a black screen. You're talking to no one. And they also need to have the letter of recommendations. And one of them was needed to be academic. So I was like, oh, I can't apply to Queen's because I can't get an academic reference. And Mark was like, okay, think back. Who could you maybe reach out to? And I reached out to my professor. It was a big lecture hall. I don't even know how she remembers me. It was Psychology of Human Sexuality. And I had written this whole paper on yoga and sexuality, and she loved it so much and wanted to publish it. So I just wrote her an email, 7 years later, being like, I don't know if you remember me, but would you be willing to write me this anyways? So last minute, I applied to MAC and Queen's, which like very, very, very last minute. I hadn't thought about it for that whole year. And yeah, that's kind of how that happened.
What a crazy journey.
Yeah.
So much to unpack there.
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
So I don't even know what to ask you because there's a lot of things I want to ask you. So how about I ask you first about why you chose MAC instead of Queen's? So did you get accepted to both first off? And what made you choose one over the other?
So I'm not the most strategic in all of this, but I think a little bit of that a lot of my philosophy is kind of just trusting life and seeing a lot how if you follow what you're passionate about and what feels shiny to you, then and you keep working hard, that doors can open. So I ended up, it's a little bit of a funny story. I also applied to the University of Brighton, which was in Southern England.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately got into University of Brighton, but I turned them down with the hopes of getting in for Canada because now I'm a permanent resident technically, so I could get in-country tuition type thing. So it would be, $200,000 in debt. It would just be a nice 50 grand in debt. So I turned down University of Brighton, and I ended up getting into Mac right off the bat and waitlisted at Queen's. And I believe I was like 43rd.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even think. I was just like, accept Mac. I'm waitlisted 43rd, so probably won't get in. Later on, I find out that like people into the 60s and 70s and 80s sometimes get
Oh,
in.
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I didn't know that. So based off that year, I would have gotten into Queen's, but I just accepted. I was like so, beside myself that I
Mm-hmm.
just said yes to Mac. And I'm very happy I did. But I know it's not the most sophisticated answer, but that's why I chose Mac.
Hey, I got into one school, so you gotta take it where you get it, right?
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
good to know that people get off the wait list that far deep too, like getting in from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, because I'm sure there's people who have gotten waitlisted who lose
Mm-hmm.
hope because they think that number 50 is so far down the list.
Yeah.
But I guess if students are accepting their acceptances to other universities, some spots starts
Mm-hmm.
to open up. And
Yes.
if
I
those same students are getting into a lot of universities, a lot of spots are going to open up.
Yes, and I know for my graduating class at Mac, there were students that were waitlisted in the 60s that, got accepted. So it's definitely possible for sure.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
why don't you explain how the GPA process works for you as someone who is educated in a American university who
Yeah.
then trying to come into a Canadian program for physiotherapy?
Yeah. That was also a thing that really messed with my mind all throughout PT school because in my brain, an A is a 90 to 100, a B is an 80 to an 89, and a C is a 70 to a 79. So when I applied for school, when I applied through what was that website? Uh,
Orpus.
yeah. So they recalculate your GPA. But so in Canada, it's very different. I think a 78, 79 is a B, right?
Yes. And
So
we have pluses and minuses here as well.
yeah, we have that too. And every prof will do little bit things different. Like some profs a 90 would be an A and other profs it would be an A minus. But still, my GPA did not change when, would you call it ORPAS? Yeah.
Orpus, yeah.
Or when they
Orpas, Orpus.
Yeah, when they recalculated it, it was the same as it was on my transcripts from UF. So I don't know why that's the case. And I even called them and kind of argued it because if I got a C plus in a course, that's a 78, 79,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And they
which
were
would
like,
be a B plus.
yeah, a huge difference.
Huge
But all
difference.
they're saying, we're just going off of the letter grade on your transcripts. And like if we don't have they're like, if you can get your syllabus or whatever from that course, then like we could look at it. But I don't know, from 2010 to 2014, I don't have any of that stuff. And I like spent days trying to find stuff online and couldn't find anything. So I don't know, didn't push it too much, but I was very surprised that they didn't, my Orpus recalculated GPA was the exact same GPA on my
Mm.
transcript.
And what was your GPA, if you remember?
Yeah, it was a 3.73 that I believe went up to a 3.75 when I retook those two courses. And I got an A in both of them.
Okay, and you got accepted in 2019, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
not too far ago, and your GPA was 3.75 and you were able to get in, which these days, as you know, the GPAs keep climbing higher and higher. So it's good to know that maybe your experiences were able to carry you, or something else was able to carry you as well,
Yeah.
towards that acceptance letter.
Yeah.
So in the process of getting into McMaster, you have to take the Casper. Was that the case for you in 2019?
No.
So what did you do then? Were you doing the MMI at that time, or was there something else in place? Or
So
sorry, the Kira. Kira is the
yeah,
Kira
the Kira
math.
interview.
Kira.
Yes. There's no exams or anything, which I think would have been an obstacle that I would have not overcome. So that was one of the big shiny things for keep trying to apply to Mac was you just needed, I think it was 4 prerequisites and then this Kira interview. And as long as you meet the minimum GPA, then you're automatically given an interview. So the first year that I had applied, I didn't realize that you could practice for the interview. So I missed all of that practice. I thought you just go on and take it. So definitely read all of the fine details of everything because it does tell you that you can have practice runs. So for Mac, the second year, I practiced a whole bunch with all of their practice interview questions, which are not that similar to what they actually ask you. Like the practice questions were, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? And I'm like, you don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've done in the last 5 years. There's no personal statement. There's no letter of recommendations. They don't know anything about you. And they're asking these kind of like questions that you have to strategically fit who you are into those questions. You have to know those top things that you want to get across to say. So applying the second year, my husband, who used to run a marketing firm and like did thousands of interviews, like it for his career back then, he really helped me try to paint my story of who I was, what are those major points I want to get across. I watched a lot of, I think on YouTube, the Canadian physio student.
Yeah.
I watched some of his interview or his videos on how to get into PT school, and I learned about the physiotherapy competencies. So you know those like key words like management and leadership and professional practice, and kind of knowing how you want to paint your story that allows to highlight those qualities and those attributes that you have demonstrated. But the interview process for McMaster is very nerve-wracking, especially for somebody who doesn't love public speaking or have difficulty speaking. It's not representative of what a real interview would be, where you and I are talking. So when my interview for University of Brighton, it was just like this. I was talking to somebody and it was great. I was able to show my personality and laugh, and it was very personable. Where at Mac, I believe you get 30 seconds to prepare. You read the question, it comes up on the screen. You're, like this, you're just looking at a blank screen. The question comes up, you have 30 seconds to think about it, and then you get 2 minutes to answer it. And all you see on the screen is this timer counting down. And so it's stressful and it's unnatural, and you're trying to answer some kind of silly question of, you're in this hypothetical situation and what would you do? And you're also trying to get in all of the points about who you are and everything. So it's very awkward. And I felt like I did a terrible job at it both times. The second time I was like, kind of just, I didn't have, I don't know. I was like, if I get in, that's excellent. If I don't, like, life will still go on. So I didn't feel like I was obsessing about it too much.
And did you do that interview after you'd already gotten to Brighton?
No.
Oh, so you're still waiting on any university at this point?
Yeah. Yeah. What is funny is just because people, I think, especially now with how competitive everything is. I mean, when we were going through undergrad and stuff in high school, like it was competitive, and just having those 5 years out and then coming back, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like a whole generation happened where it's even so much more competitive, and the stakes are so much more high. So I think a lot of us, especially if we're applying to PT school, are very self-critical and overachievers and type A personalities. And so you're kind of, dissecting all of the things that you're doing wrong or you could have done better at. So this interview, in my eyes, didn't go well at all. Ended up getting in, and then Mac, a couple months into the program, asked me if they could use my video to help train reviewers on what they want in interviews.
Wow,
So,
awesome.
what you think in
Yeah.
your head is not true. And I think they understand that it's an awkward and unnatural process. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't you give us a brief overview of Mac's program? Because Mac does have a pretty unique program for their physiotherapy school
Yeah.
program that they have.
Yeah. So Mac is, I have so much respect and appreciation for Mac's attempt to do something alternative and to say, this is how things have always been done. These are the gaps that aren't being filled, and let's experiment with how to fill these gaps. So learning isn't the same for everybody. And so they're really taking, okay, how can we do it where we're encouraging this self-directed learning? So just right off the bat, huge appreciation and respect for a university trying to step outside of the norm. I think traditional academia has a lot of flaws in it. That being said, it's kind of, I think, in the culture of students to complain and bitch about, sorry, I don't know if we can curse,
We'll
about
beat it.
about the program. So it's not perfect in any way, but they're really trying to do something alternative. So Mac's big thing is self-directed learning and problem-based learning. So you have very little didactic learning, which is that typical lecture hall. Somebody is speaking to you, telling you what to learn, and you are, writing notes and you memorize what they say and you take a test. Where Mac, it's here are concepts, you learn the concepts, and then we're going to test you, even though you're all learning kind of different resources, right? So all the courses are a little bit different. Clinical lab is probably like other programs, very hands-on. They give you pre-readings through books like Dutton and stuff. So you do have some type of structure of what to look at. And that's where you would do your OSCEs and all of that. Then there's PBT, so problem-based tutorial. So I really liked this too about Mac, because it was 6 months or so into the program that everything shut down. So we started in September, and March, everything shut down and we went virtual. So PBT is, you are broken into small groups and you have a tutor, which is typically a clinician from the community. So the groups can be, 6, 7, 8 people. So it's nice. It kind of makes this bigger 60-person class into this smaller class, and you have it every unit with different groups, and there's 5 units. So you get to know a lot of students throughout it. And that was helpful because remote learning, you're not seeing anybody, right? So I also appreciate that having a tutor or a clinician from the community is somebody who's actively practicing in the community and isn't just in that PhD lens. So you have that where basically you're given a healthcare problem. So you're given a patient and lots of information, and you have to make up questions. So learning objectives of based on, you get a paragraph. Okay, given this paragraph, what are the things that we need to learn and look into? And then you go and you do your research. So in the beginning, you get a tutorial on how to use the online library and stuff like that. I actually, from clinical instructors, I've heard back in the day, this was all going to the library and flipping through books and stuff like that, which I think is crazy. And then the tutor is there kind of just to make sure you're staying on track. So if you miss a learning objective, that's important. They're there to direct you and say, do you guys know what this is? No, we don't. Okay, you should maybe look into it. The only problem with that is then you have a midterm and final that are multiple choice exams or short answer exams. So you're kind of making this non-traditional, non-didactic learning and then examining it in a didactic way. So I think that's something that could improve quite significantly, because the exams are just outrageous. And you're like, 90% of what I learned isn't on here. And there's so many things that we never looked up, and you're pulling things from one resource when there's no resource that we're all universally using. So I think PBT has a lot of pros and a few cons. And then you have, your PT practice. So your legislative stuff, which I did not know that was on the PCE. And I wish I did beforehand, because I would have taken that course a lot more seriously, I think, if I knew that you were actually tested on regulations like that, which makes sense. But so MAC is 5 units, and you have academics, then a placement. So you get four placements where you're in the community. So it's academic placement, academic placement, academic placement, academic. So whatever, five academics and 4 placements. The placements are really good too, because you usually get 2 in a private practice or community practice. So that would be more of your MSK orthopaedics. And then you get 1 in rehab. So that could be the rehab part of a hospital. Mine was in inpatient stroke. You could also have other outpatient rehab facilities. And then an acute setting, which is typically where you get a lot of your cardio resp hours, which that's a whole nother story. I think a lot of new students don't know the cardio resp and neuro side of PT, and that's even a thing. That it's the MSK is just one little fraction of it. So yeah, that's that with the 4 placements and 5 academic.
Awesome. And how was the adjustment from going from a didactic learning style to a problem-based learning style for you? How was that experience like? Because that is a worry from a lot of prospective MAC students, right? People are applying, they're really worried about having to start using this problem-based learning style to learn physiotherapy.
Yeah. For me, I think it was a little bit different because I had 5 years where I wasn't in school. And so I felt like I was starting from ground zero. That was a big hurdle of mine was I came into the program. Everybody came from a kin background. I did not at all. I was one of, I think, 2 or 3 students that didn't have an undergrad from kin. And everybody had just graduated either the year or year before. So everybody was kind of fresh, and I felt like I was learning what lateral and medial and all of those words meant, right? So I felt extremely behind, and I felt for a while like I wasn't going to be able to do this at all. The first semester, I was like, there's no way I'm passing at all. I know this is a little bit digressing. I'll get back to your question. I just wanted to like let people know too that just to give yourself a break and have trust in yourself. So I came in feeling like a huge underdog. I didn't know anything. Everybody knew anatomy. I didn't. The anatomy course that I took didn't talk about names of muscles or anything. It was just, I don't know. It didn't prepare me. So I ended up graduating first in my class, which I found that out a couple of weeks ago that I was shocked at, because for the whole first year, I was like, I can't do this. I'm not cut out to do this. Everybody else knows everything and I know nothing. So I think that's just a really good kind of short story on like how you can be extremely successful despite all of that. I really liked the problem-based learning and the self-directed learning. It's hard and it's stressful when you're so focused on grades and you're, probably a lot of people applying to PT school, a lot of their worth and their validation is around getting good grades. And so when you're so caught up on what's your letter grade on a test, then it can feel like self-directed learning is very scary because you don't know how you're going to be tested and you don't know if you're doing things right. The good thing is that everybody's in the same boat as you, right? Like nobody really knows what they're doing and everybody's learning this. And Mac knows that this is a learning curve for people. I think that if you are intelligent enough to have the GPA to get into PT school, that you can absolutely do the self-directed learning. I think it gives you skills that are, invaluable for when you leave school. I feel like I can teach anything to myself. I can do any amount of research. It's no problem to come across a problem, not know what to do and figure it out for myself. That's just what they've trained you to do. Whereas if in that didactic style, if you're just being told it, then you're not really actively doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it also, for me, I kind of tell this story in my brain that my memory isn't that good, that I need to really work harder to memorize lists than other people. So the self-directed learning is you're so much more engaged in that learning and that studying that it allows you to understand it rather than just memorize it, because you're given, these problems and you have to solve those problems. So it, syncs and resonates and stays with you in a different way than if you just read a whiteboard and memorized the list. So I think anybody can do it. I don't think it should be a hurdle or a something that deters you from Mac. I think it's an added challenge, but it's a lot of fun, and everybody in your class is, mentally freaking out about it. So you're not alone, and you'll for sure get through it, and you'll probably work harder than you need to and end up to be first in your class when you really didn't need to be. I think it's no problem.
Awesome. And I had a question there because you had mentioned previously that you were a few years out from school when you entered PT school. So you were a mature student when you entered in. Everyone else in your class was fresh out of undergrad, all kin students.
Mhm.
Did you feel like an outsider, and were you able to make friends? How was that transition for you, being someone who, I guess, didn't completely identify with your classmates going through the same program with them?
Yeah. I don't think I felt like an outsider, but I felt like a big underdog. I felt like, especially in that first semester, like I wouldn't be somebody that anybody would ever turn to for help or guidance. I kind of felt like a chicken with my head cut off. It wasn't difficult for me to make friends. I don't know, I find it easy to connect with people and socialize. So I don't think that was a problem at all. And I'm also very, like, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm an open book. So I'm not afraid to say, I don't get this, or I feel scared, or, I'm worried. I'm not afraid to show any of those things. So I think that, everybody, even if you are fresh out of school and kin, everybody is feeling like I can't do this in the first semester. So I think I was able to form quite a lot of connections because everyone is a little bit nervous at that beginning. I So I feel like being more of a mature student and having a lot of life experience, like I did, like many, many travels to different countries by myself, lived in different countries, worked in different jobs. I feel like I had a variety of life experience that made me extremely successful right now. And even in my clinical placements, when you're actually able to communicate with people and be out in the world, what you learn in PT school is that there's a lot that goes into a patient's recovery, and your technical skills make up a small portion of that pie chart. Big portions of that pie chart are communication, compassion, empathy. I had been meditating an hour every single day for 5 years on that stuff. So I feel like everything I had done in those 5 years had really prepared me, but I didn't see it in that academic moment. It's kind of looking at retrospect. So I think it made it harder in the beginning, but in the end, like, okay, so now I've been working for 5 weeks. I have a full-time caseload at both of my clinics. I have a wait list. I'm booking, like at my pelvic clinic, I'm booking a month and a half, 2 months out. So I'm like fast tracking it, right? Like I also felt like I
Mhm.
was behind the wheel because I'm 30 years old and all my friends back home have had their careers for the last 5 years and stuff. And I'm just starting, but I feel like I'm not necessarily starting like brand new. I feel like I was able to skip quite a few steps from having a lot of those soft skills, which I would argue are more important than the technical skills in a lot of physiotherapy. So, yeah, but back to your question in the beginning, it was definitely extremely difficult. But I think the academics and the intelligence and what you know aspect is like just a small fraction of what goes into how you'll be a practitioner and how you'll succeed in school.
Awesome. Let's talk a bit about those experiences that you had before physiotherapy school and how they've translated to be an advantage for you now as a physiotherapist.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was talking to a friend earlier, and I was now in my practice. One thing that I'm really seeing, and I was noticing it in clinical placement as well, is I think my superpower is I'm able to connect with anybody. So a burly dude firefighter, a 75-year-old woman, a grumpy 8-year-old man, kind of, or a teenager, or anybody, people from different cultures. I like, it's very effortless for me to connect with them. And I'm seeing that so much of what we do is we're sitting down and we're forming that therapeutic relationship, and that kind of trust and connection and creating space for somebody to tell their story is huge. I mean, these people are seeing practitioner after practitioner, physician, specialist in XYZ, and they're not feeling like they're being heard because everything is so rushed. So we have such this precious advantage of spending 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours with somebody every week, and that you're really able to form this relationship. So I would say my traveling experience, and most of that traveling was in third world countries, that I think really allowed me to gain a sense of comfortability with different cultures that I think is extremely important, especially in Ontario, where we have such a wide diversity of cultures. It allowed me to, like, little connections. Like, I was with this woman today who was from Lebanon, and I was asking her, like, what are you doing tonight? And she's cooking this meal. What are some of your favorite foods to cook? Oh, tabbouleh, and husband smoked shisha and all of this stuff. And I'm like, oh, I spent this time in Israel, and, like the tabbouleh there and that kind of stuff. So those little connections, just, finding little, not similarities, but things to like create conversations. Yeah, exactly.
Make connections.
Yeah. So I think like all of the traveling I've done has done so much for that. Teaching yoga was something that I think allowed me to start getting comfortable in teaching something. So whether you're teaching a sport or anything, it's a skill to start learning how to explain things that just continues to get better and better with practice. So I think that really helps. I feel like, in the beginning, when I started explaining an exercise, I'd get all nervous, and then I'd be like, this is just like teaching yoga, and then just put on that yoga hat. And, also that's another thing is I feel like my exercise prescription is very weak, because I didn't come from a kin background and I haven't really spent time in the gym. So my knowledge, especially with those rehab exercises, like I never heard what dead bug was before school. Really silly things like that, where when you're brand new to something, it's overwhelming when you don't know any of those things. And that the person's like, do a Palloff press. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? So I'm realizing now that like, this is my practice. Like my exercise prescriptions can be yoga poses if I want them to be, if they fit and they suit for what that person needs. So you can, like, I don't know. So that I feel like has prepared me quite a bit. And then I think like a big thing is humility. I don't know if this is how I've always been, but I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to ask questions. Anybody from my program will know me as a person who was always asking all the questions. I was one of the main people that had their cameras on in all of our virtual classes, talking to guest instructors and stuff. I'm not afraid to say I don't get this. And that was a piece of feedback. So that's another thing about Mac is like there's so much feedback, which is, by fourth and fifth unit, you're a little bit like, oh my gosh, I don't want to reflect and get feedback anymore. But it's good because you're able to see, okay, what are you doing well at? What can you work better in? And how can you progress? So one of the big feedbacks I always got was, you're not afraid to look stupid. And I was like, is that is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know what you're trying to get at there. But I think I think the essence of it is you're not afraid to ask questions that other people are thinking and are just too nervous to say.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a humility aspect that I don't know if it's just from age, when you transition into your 30s, it's more of like caring less about what other people think. With my meditation and self-development background, I deeply know that we're all just scared little children that are self-conscious, and the way that I feel, everybody feels. And so I don't need to, take all those feelings really seriously, that I can be vulnerable and humble. So I think that's been a huge thing with patient care, because there's a level of equality, I think, that's established while you're still owning the space as the professional and the expert in the conversation. You're able to get on the patient's level and to be like, yeah, it's really hard. That one time when I threw out my back, I couldn't do any of these exercises. And you're able to, again, connect and have that humility. And then also, I'm not afraid with patients to be like, I don't know. How about I look that up, do more research, and then our next visit will go from there. That's another skill from that self-directed learning from MAP. So I know there was a lot there, but I think, again, it goes back to those soft skills that I think prepared me the most.
Yeah, I really love everything you've said so far, because you touched on a lot of different things that I think anyone listening who's a prospective physiotherapist or a physiotherapy student who's going to enter the workforce can learn from, and learn that physiotherapy isn't all just anatomy and knowing specific exercises. At the end of the day, we're dealing with people, right? And you have to make connections, you have to build trust. And I've seen this personally as a physiotherapist. I've seen that sometimes I'm not the best physiotherapist for a person. Maybe someone else will connect with a specific patient better. I might know more physiotherapy specific knowledge, but is that what will drive the best outcomes for this patient? Is that what's best for this patient? And that's not always the case. So there's a lot of factors in play in someone's recovery, as you mentioned. And everyone, I think, has something to bring to the table and bring to the profession, and something to contribute. And I
Yeah.
loved hearing your story, because you have a lot of experience and a lot to offer to this profession. So I just wanted to end it off by asking you if you have any general tips that you want to give to anybody who wants to become a PT or who is applying to enter physiotherapy school.
I think the physiotherapy student, Canadian physiotherapy student, that gentleman, he hit it right on the head, where learn those physiotherapy competencies. I directed my Queen's personal statement very much to those physiotherapy competencies. And I think that's the reason why I even got waitlisted there. Those are big, hot buzzwords, and it's kind of the foundation and the blueprint of the whole physiotherapy profession and curriculum. I would say don't get discouraged if you don't get in. I think a lot of the people in my cohort were second, third time applying before they get in. And I'm not sure for sure, but I have a feeling that that's taken a little bit into account in the application, as if you're a returning applicant. And that again, those soft skills, those building the ability to communicate and connect with people. And also, if that's not your thing, then still, if you love physio, go into physio. If you're interested more in the research aspect, you don't have to work directly with patient care. But if you do want to work in patient care, building those communication skills, and not just textbook compassion and empathy, but real deep-hearted compassion and empathy, looking at that it's difficult to be in a human body, and it's difficult to get injuries, and it's difficult to go through aging, and to be able to empathize with that while still, of course, having boundaries. I think you could never do enough of that. And be yourself. I think there was a lot of moments where I felt discouraged to speak in school through my yoga lens and speak through some of my alternative lens, because I was such a black sheep in a way. And now that I'm in the field, I'm seeing how it makes me, stand out in quite a considerable way, and that those aren't things to die down. They're things to flourish and emphasize. So yeah, and then just don't get discouraged. I mean, I got discouraged probably 100 million times along the way, and I put myself through a lot of stress and unnecessary worry. That, you know, if you get in, that's the biggest hurdle. I think after that, you'll get through it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. I know you have a very unique story, but I think everyone can learn from it because these are human experiences that you shared with us. And everyone has their own version of it. And your version was unique to you, but it's very translatable to the way people feel. And I feel that this is something that will be very relatable for a lot of physio students who are entering the program for the first time, who are really nervous about what to expect. I think from your story, we learned that in the end, it ends up working out. And right now, you're thriving and flourishing in your practice right now, which I'm very happy to see. And once again, I just want to thank you for sharing your experience with us. Thanks, Nicole.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Cash. And then one last thing I want to say is, as much as the 2 years kind of suck going through school because it's so much work, to be able to do something that you love, like this career is just phenomenal. And there's so many lifelong avenues to learn and change directions. And I just feel so blessed to be in this career. And I feel very blessed to have met you, Cash. You've just been a great resource throughout being a student, and you helped me prepare more than I ever could be prepared for those licensing exams. So thank you.
My pleasure. All right, everyone. That's the end of our episode for today. If you want, you can check us out on different social media platforms. So we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook and Instagram. So you can catch us with our tag physioschool.ca, PhysioSchool or PhysioSchool.ca. You try any one of those, and you can find us on the gram, Twitter, or Facebook. So that's it for us. We will see you on the next episode.